Okay, here we go. Scratching for Feed, 1974 to 1978. Dishwasher at the Florida version of Denny's. When the dishwasher broke down, we washed by hand for a week or two. Just the two of us, like donkeys. Poor guy next to me, an old black guy, said he got a 15-cent raise, and I think he said he'd been there for 18 years. I don't know what he made, but the waiters made, oh, no, I know the waiters made 99 cents an hour anyway. I'm getting old. We're going to go, well, what's that? Was that in 32 or 33? Let's hold up the whole story while I figure it out. Okay. When the dishwasher broke down, we washed by hand for a week or two. The interior design keynote was orange and magenta tuck and roll vinyl everywhere, jarring even on the best day. Since I started at 5, the object was to get stoned early enough to come down in time for work. In the event, this morphed into getting stoned enough so as to come down at work and hit the free coffee covered up. I graduated to waiter, which sorely tested my marijuana-impaired memory. Disappointed folks hoping for a warm, matronly waitress or a cute girl waitress, all for 99 cents an hour, plus tips ranging from 1/4 up to 4/4. I don't think I ever saw paper money on the table more than once. I'm just saying that to be nice. And that'd be like a family of, just crammed in the booth, kids and mom and everybody else, and dad talking like this, oh, we had a cheeseburger. You're like, what? Wait staff made the hot fudge sundaes, which caused a traffic jam when the movie theater next door let out. Industrial strength whipped cream casters are 10 times more powerful than store bought ones. And when they run out of whipped cream, they will let out a blast of propellant that atomizes the beautiful topping you have made and distribute it evenly on everybody crowded in the hot fudge sundae corner. Favorite memory is exiting the kitchen at speed and catching the edge of a tray loaded with 5 beautiful sundaes, causing them to fly up and fountain into 5 separate flight paths toward a table of 5 movie goers. Time had slowed down so I could record every detail of 5 perfect near misses, the open mouths, the popping eyes, the spectacular landings. The enduring mystery was that never got solved was how a couple who were batting their eyes at one another only minutes ago could drink the milkshakes that I was now cleaning out of the milkshake machine and tried to sample, only to spit it on the floor. It was so sour. Well, the machine was just an insulated box. They counted on keeping the stuff cold enough to the end of the shift. Cutting corners. It was sour. Were they hypnotized by the glossy photo of the beautiful milkshake? Or possibly by love? It happened several times, and I never understood it. Building docks with David and Carlton, who we lived with, and with Carlton's foster father, Leroy, 75, on the little lakes around Melrose, Florida. Lake Geneva. Best hot weather job combining swimming and simple carpentry, cedar wood that smelled like bananas, and an occasional water moccasin to adrenalize everybody. That's when I said, "Oh, I'll work in the workboat. We had like a little dinghy that you could stand in. I'm not getting in the water with that goddamn thing." He just sat on a piling looking at us, and then went on its way. David and Carl were Nick's play uncles and our hosts of sorts. David, who had to have the Rolling Stones play continually, I mean all the time when he was awake. That is until the night he mistook the lid of the record player for the toilet lid and with a terrific buzzing sound retired the record player for a blissful 2 months until the day a guest idly reached over and turned it back on, not knowing its history, now dried out. And sweet Carlton, the 13th and last child of Leroy, now 75, took in as a foster child. We all lived together, Cindy, myself, and the two boys, David and Carl, in a tiny cabin like elves under a gorse bush, only to scale, so it was in a world within a world, a giant live oak. I got overexcited and did not take the pictures I was supposed to take. Oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to take a picture. Oh boy. Oh, this is stupid. Oh well, sorry. It's a beautiful picture though. And it could honestly just be where we lived. It's incredible. It's incredible what you can find on the internet. David and Carl and I all worked for or with Leroy building docks on the lakes. It was like being on a very nice work detail or because Leroy would call out every step of the operation from his position in the water, oftentimes just his head visible like a giant great muskrat. Out there, son, put your nail higher. There, that's it. And so on. We basically didn't have to think at all. Very nice on the mornings we were sweating out last night's beer. Oh, God. Well, folks, here we go again. Da-da-da. Rough and ready version. Uh, There's a beautiful lake, David with Eli, and a little bit of me at like 27 or some shit. Oh well. Oh well. On we go. Uh, well, as long as I'm holding everything up, I might as well do it all at once. Uh, this is kind of like what happened, only we didn't have a nice power tool to drive the. And they're using aluminum pylons. We had fresh, creosote, prickly, splintery telephone poles, and our job was to job them up and down. And Leroy would be in the water with a 1 horsepower water pump and a like 1 inch steel pipe blasting the sand out of the way. And he could dig like that at the sand. Marvelous. This is the general scene, walking on boards laid out this way and that, which always made me tense if Leroy was working topside because he could not see the boards over his belly and had good at memorizing where they were as they disappeared under his belly. We didn't have dainty silver pilings either. We worked with brand new telephone poles, splintery with a fresh coat of creosote, heated by the sun. Leroy would jet sand out from under them while we jobbed them up and down in a bear hug. More fun than it sounds like. The water moccasins only showed up once, but the tales of them striking the tiny workboat was enough for me to stick on the dock. In the winter, we built fences in the cold water to substitute for dock building. I was still young enough to think it amazing that Leroy could recognize a fence he put in 1929. That was like me remembering a job I did in 1978. Not a big problem. See also, I am now older than Leroy. See also raiding orange orchards and pecan orchards for food. Tried picking oranges, but could barely make gas and a sandwich money. I couldn't hang it off a 60-foot ladder with a bag on my neck, only partly healed from a car accident. Noticing the ladder had spring-loaded several small branches with 6-inch thorns covered with black mold aiming at my eyeballs. I quit after 3 days, feeling like I should say grace before eating another orange. Morbid detail, the school bus that brought seasonal workers down from up north was white like a chain gang bus and had white wolf painted on the side. Visions of the lost boys being turned into donkeys swam in my head. I couldn't believe a whole bed could fill up this huge, like, I don't know, 4x4 by, almost up to your waist bin. And that's how you got paid. Like, oh. And at that time, I was working on a ladder to a commercial house painting. The neck situation wasn't too good, but I didn't even come close. So ranch had $12 a day working with Angus and a near 1-ton breeder named Amos. Amos, who weighed nearly 2,000 pounds, who hadn't been weaned right and was kept in the barn separately so he wouldn't go out and suckle the entire herd dry, and who had a sudden exception to being moved to another stall, which is to say, an exception to being whacked with a 2x4, and where he turned and charged Tommy, catching him square in the chest, creating a live-action cartoon sequence of Tommy's teeth flying out of his mouth, his hat scooting skyward along with his sunglasses. He lived. I did a quick rodeo clown act, jumping toward Amos, flapping my arms and yelling. It worked too well. Amos turned on me, and I did a 10-yard dash ending under the gate so fast my eyes on an emergency circuit didn't adjust for my last second change from vertical to horizontal to get under the gate and presented the scene entirely in vertical format as if I was going through a door at the end of a hallway. That's only happened once. Tommy nearly got killed, except for being by the part of the stall that gave instead of by a post. He would have. 2 days later, I was holding a 2-pound coffee can full of grain to lure Amos into a trailer out of there. He clambered up the ramp, and I had to stay with it until there was a little door where I could jump out, and Tommy closed behind him. Tommy had had enough of it. He wasn't even gonna. That was enough. That I'm not paid for doing that more than once. I quit my regular job, house painting, and tried to get by economizing and doing odd jobs a couple of days a week, working at a gentleman's cattle ranch where Amos was. Uh, uh, outside of town. It was owned by a retired Air Force colonel who we never saw, and so we had the run of the place and grew immense marijuana plants back when the property gave out to a swamp. We would go out to find lost cattle and water them. The occasional calf who had wandered back there was stuffed in one of the dog boxes on the Jeep. Few things are as heavy. It was like carrying a refrigerator as they could kick and thrash without warning. And they just squish them in the dog box, and then they were touching on all sides. I don't know. You certainly learned new ways of asserting yourself with these critters. No sense saying, "Oh, please, can you just, come down this chute for me? I won't hurt you." Uh, so, auto body work on Volkswagens in a slightly crooked hippie shop in the one stop sign town I lived in. Painted the sign for the shop and several other businesses there, beginning with one for the gas station that said ice, beer, ammo. That was all new to me. In Florida, you could have a beer between your legs if you're driving. You just couldn't be drunk. And the passengers, they're not important. Don't pay attention to them. And then you could drive up to the liquor store, and there was a chute just the size of a case of beer in case you didn't feel like going inside and carrying it to the car. Okay, I loved Florida. I mean, door to door knife sharpening, instant failure. Good way to scare whoever's home is, though. Yeah, one time a woman came to the door and said, "Hi, I'm here with you. You want me to sharpen your knives?" And she kind of goes, and she was reaching up for the latch of the screen door. And I was like, "Okay, sorry, I get it." Yeah, I still had a way to go at 27. So during this time, when I'm frankly quite hungry sometimes, then I walked out to an acquaintance's house to mow the lawn. He didn't take the hint that I needed something to eat right away, so halfway through mowing the lawn, I was lightheaded. I stopped for a moment, I like those climactic moments in a movie when the soundtrack goes still. Began to see many colored mist moving through the air. It was bursting out of the plants like steam from a cooked pea on the end of a fork. With bigger and grainier, more colors, twinkling blue and red, some green and purple, and all at the threshold like the fugitive things you see skipping around when you stare at the ceiling or an empty gray sky. Against the sky, whole trees were bursting forth, whatever this was, magnetism, life. There was a background field of it too that moved right through the large trees, undisturbed. And a bush, in the shade, a bush was busy with small points of light, no bigger than moths, shaped like a vortex, that swooped into a specific place on the bush, busied around and tending it in some way, and then swooshed off. There were perhaps 20 at a time, coming and going, like the action in a beehive. The Finhorn people had come to town recently. Finhorn, where they were into, this in Scotland, they were into divas and nature spirits and grew huge outside vegetables with the help from the same. There were city people who just moved to a caravan park. I don't remember why, and and there's terrible soil there, and didn't know what they were doing. But they were communing with nature spirits, and they grew these enormous things. And so there's a whole foundation that grew up that's still going. It must have been an influence. They came and give a talk, and people said, "So, what kind of fertilizer do you use?" 10, 20? And then they have to kind of get things back on track. All this was still new to me. A friend leaving town asked me to return a book to the library. It was about dowsing. I found out I could do it. That was weird enough, just seeing that every place I had put a sculpture in the garden was a center, and all the paths were on path lines. I actually contracted things a little bit there just to make the story keep going, which now I'm interrupting. I already knew how because the neighbors up in upstate New York had an old guy come to douse for water on their property to dig a well. And so we all got together, we went over, and he said, "Yeah, right here." And we started digging in upstate New York soil, which is soil, rock, soil, a little rock, some more soil, a big motherfucking rock. And I was still very much a scatterbrain. And it was remarkable, though. Also claustrophobe, so you get down in a hole, and you can only have one thought: is to put the soil in the bucket, so the bucket can get out of here, and then come back nice and quick. And you just total concentration. I mean, forget a pillow. You would want to figure out how to meditate. Just get off the ground a ways. Yeah, we didn't hit water. People, said, "Oh, I don't," and I'm sure as hell wasn't going to do it by myself. So anyway, but I didn't really pursue it. It's that much, Then in Florida, like a year or so later, here was this book fleshing the subject out. I found out I could do it. That was weird enough, just seeing that every place I had put a sculpture in the garden was a center, and all the paths were on path lines. Path lines make the stick go up. Nevertheless, it's a stick, and it goes up in the same place every time. It's visible, not a diva or a spirit or any of the other rank and file spirit folk. And the two patterns are mostly 8 spirals coming to a center, and then the path lines are kind of like jaggedy, like an electric spark connecting to the neighboring center. And you can you can certainly feel the center. It would be like where you go and say, oh, yeah, let's put the sleeping bags and stuff here and the fireplace, so it's that kind of whoop feeling. And the path lines were, you see that the cows crossing a flat pasture going in this jaggedy line, and it was nothing to do with following terrain. I'm convinced it was, they were just being able to feel the path line, and so they could just mosey along with their head down. uh, and in a house, the hallways very often were on a path line, and I think that's how you navigate to the bathroom in the middle of the night. But that's just, didn't say that in the book. I knew the people from Findhorn were sincere, but had reserved some skepticism nevertheless. Well, now what? I'd only had one vision in my life, and that was when I was a child. I think I was 7 or 8, but out of nowhere, down at the end of my vegetable patch, where I had a fort and was in the process, never finished, of digging an underground lair. Uh, it was a rotting stump, and overlaid on it was a softly shimmering, highly detailed vision, a presence really of Saul on his throne and David sitting on the ground beside him. Even then, I would have thought it was a imagining from my storybook, except that it was markedly different. Although I hadn't worked out the specifics then, or where the focus was, I knew a kind of all over sexual feeling. Or to put it another way, I knew what flirting was, and that it did go on openly in church, or in childhood storybooks. In fact, there was none of this kind of zest in church. Church was about getting a lofty drag going, where Joel said, on a falling cadence as if to suggest loss and leave taking. Mm-hmm. Saul looked forbidding, grumpy, but David, I remember his skin, the skin of his bare arm, almost golden, and with a sheen like it would get in hot, humid weather. He looked right at me for a moment, delighted, inviting, very alive, and alive to himself. This didn't last long, but it was confronting like a true meeting and was a talisman always. New York City again. I thought I'd never live there again. Only this time I lived in a brownstone on the Upper West Side and had a car. The move was driven by the need to find a school for our son who was deaf. Incredibly fortunate to land in the 87th Street house where Ruth Messenger lived. Oh my. These were, there were Sufi dances at St. John the Divine, days or nights, I should say, and some of the best. St. John's Square, 75 people in a circle looked like a small gathering in that immense space. The dome vanished in black. It was so far above. I got a job doing high-end house painting for a crazy German who decided to epitomize every stereotype about Germans with a management style that involved stopping by the job for, for a 10-minute harangue building to his stock phrase, "I throw you out the window," and this for a blemish invisible to the eye and only detectable by your fingernail. The other carpenters were, they couldn't believe this guy. Uh, oh Lord, that means it's been an hour. Um, Big plus was the all Yugoslavian crew at a radio station that mysteriously only had two sponsors: the Crystal Palace in Queens and a dry cleaner also in Queens that played traditional music from Eastern Europe for an hour straight at a time, moving from country to country. Nobody said a word about this unusual arrangement having grown up with state-sponsored radio, which this obviously was. Uncle Sam said thank you to refugees from Eastern Europe. Sure, why not? And terrific music for sanding all day. It's just a wonderful, wonderful music. Like strong and sad at the same time. And lively. How's that work? Then yet another break. The school in New York is stuck in the 19th century and believes that if you deprive a child sign language, they will learn to speak. Not if their not if their hearing comes in at 110 decibels of the pain threshold. So, I don't know. Hearing people are incredible. Gallaudet needed another principal, and some hearing lady said, "Oh yeah, I can do this. I'll learn sign language over the summer." No, you won't. Oh my God. You don't feel, if you can't speak English, people think you're stupid. So believe me, being deaf makes you have outrageous reflexes, and you have to look at people, which is, this whole tribal connection, which is rude in our culture. You're not supposed to look for more than a few beats, and then look away and then look back. That's the farthest thing from stupid. Anyway, I'm getting, uh-oh, I have a nasty feeling I've overtaxed the memory of this thing. I know for certain that as far that I have never felt such an extreme of cold anger as I did leaving the office of the principal as she was telling us this. City split to Berkeley, where there was a good school for the deaf, and our old friends, the hog farmers, and the bargain. I went to live with my Suvi teacher in Hull, outside of Boston. Candy factory. That's the first job I got. Uh, some genius decided that what the workforce needed was free coffee in the old brick factory where Howard Johnson's candy was made. Everyone had sparkly eyes as a result, were chatty and social, and most had been on the job for 25 years or more. My job was to put the candy stripes on, flipping this 80-pound hunk and so on to taffy, getting it nice and close so I'd leave an imprint of the buttons on my fresh, clean shirt that they issued. This was also a race because the taffy never stopped spreading. We had to go just shy of as quick as possible, or it got too long and floppy to carry over to the roller machine, which turned it into a 6-foot long cone ending in the inch or so size of the finished candy, which was chopped and wrapped faster than the eye could see at the end of the machine. in this din so loud I could not hear myself singing at the top of my lungs, honestly, and so loud there was no point yelling in someone's ear, sat four dreamy, middle-aged women with feather dusters and a box of cornstarch, dusting away as needed to keep their strange, giant, rotating seal babies from sticking to their cribs. That's what it looked like. They were lost in their own serene thoughts, rarely taking their eyes off their charges. We're going to make a candy man out of you. They were training me on all the machines. Some were as old as the planet would have looked at home on Jules Verne's Nautilus, all copper with brad-clad doors. Others, like the chocolate tank, as big as an above-ground pool, that fed the entire place heated chocolate through a system of stainless steel pipes, were more Willy Wonka. The pride of the establishment was a candy center machine that made the centers for their version of Junior Mints. It was the size of a car wash, cost $1 million, and was painted that pastel chlorine green you see in Russian space capsules. The rack came down and pressed indents in the cornstarch laid out in 18 by 24-inch trays. Then another rack came down with corresponding hoses and filled the indents. Then they passed through a cooling area that was spat out on a stainless steel mesh conveyor belt and delivered to a tray. My job was to catch them on the tray and stack the trays on rolling racks. Sounds easy, except whoever designed the $1 million thing had calculated very accurately where the upper limit was in terms of speed. The tricky part was when a rolling rack was full and needed to be moved and replaced. It could get very Lucille Ball here if you didn't concentrate. One of the racks had a weird wheel and wouldn't cooperate. It was 20 minutes on and 20 minutes off while the machine made up a fresh set of trays. During one of the downtimes, I rolled one of the centers into a ball and it sent it down the conveyor belt. It bounced down at just about the same rate that the belt was moving it back up. Nice and mesmerizing in a silly way. Time to do another set. It was all about getting in a rhythm. I decided, so I tried a mantra. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. Om Shri Ram Jai Ram Jai Jai Ram. A year and a half before this, I had taken initiation of the Sufi order. I found out my son was deaf and felt this huge rush of energy come to meet the problem. Oh shit, I better do something fast or I'm going to end up in the hands of the Christians or worse. Suddenly I need some answers. I saw an ad in the paper, come see Sufi dance. I had seen pictures of somewhere pretty girls in white dresses dancing in a circle. How bad could that be? I suspected, like at a magic show, there might be calls for volunteers from the audience, or, as it happened, no audience, just complete participation. I did another set with the mantra. I was getting buzzed. It was definitely helping. Then on the break, I sent another candy center down, rolling in a ball, down with my third eye. I will capture the little ball and draw it to me. I was goofing. The candy, which had been almost hopping in place, doing its up to down escalator thing, bounced a little closer and closer. I popped it in my mouth. Another candy, and back to the Swami act. I will now repel the candy. It skipped nearly to the bottom. I released it from my powerful tractor beam, and it made its way back up. Uh, no, back down, candy ball. I glared at it. Down it went. Just when I was starting to freak myself out, the supervisor came over and said, "Hey, stop playing. Don't do that." Okay, I was actually a little relieved. Nevertheless, I took away that play could be as effective as trying or intention. I never did figure out what sitting meditation was about. 2 years later, when a girlfriend showed me, oh, is that all? Like a bubble rising. It had always been described in such serious terms: empty, posture, don't think, concentrate, don't think about the elephant. Oh, brother.